I'm Jeff Mays of the New York Times, sitting in for Sam Roberts. Welcome to the New York Times Close-Up. This week, in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination, a New York Times essay has sparked intense debate online over why Democrats are losing young men. We'll talk with the writer of that essay about what it'll take to win them back. But first, I'm joined by New York City Council Speaker Adrienne Adams. With just a few months left in her tenure, she's fresh off a high-profile showdown with Mayor Adams. Under her leadership, the council overruled mayoral vetoes on laws boosting pay for delivery workers and protecting street vendors, and blocked the mayor's order allowing ICE on Rikers Island. These moves reaffirm her stated commitment to defending the city's most vulnerable and checking mayoral power. As her term winds down, we ask what she hopes to achieve in her final months. Welcome, Speaker Adams.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you.
Yeah, so you are nearing the end of your tenure, and I'm wondering, as you look back on that tenure, how would you describe it, and what do you think are some of your biggest accomplishments as Speaker?
Oh my goodness, this has been exhilarating for me, and so many accomplishments that I share. You know, of course, with the people of the city, I share with my colleagues. One of the most tremendous accomplishments has been to coalesce a group of very, very different council members in the city council. I've led the most diverse city council in the history, the first women majority council in the history of the city of New York. We represent viewpoints and thoughts from the far right to the middle, to the left, to the far left. And to be able to bring all those voices together in coalition to meet the needs of the people of this city, to me, has been a tremendous accomplishment. And again, I share that with all of my colleagues. Personally, I've seen things grow as far as CUNY Reconnect. I always put that at the top of the list, and thinking that it would be a very small initiative, one where someone has had previous credits with any CUNY school, had to leave school for one reason or another. Without getting that degree, and then being able to provide the tuition for those folks to come back into school to achieve that degree has been amazing to me. We thought we'd get a few thousand. Right now, we're looking at 50,000 re-enrollees into CUNY at this stage of the game. Something else that I've done, you know, guaranteed income for mothers that have been in domestic violence situations, other situations that have prevented them from living on their own and providing for themselves and their children. We've been able to provide 3 years worth of a stipend for over 160 women, moving them out of shelter and into permanent housing, giving them a leg up in life. There's just so much more. Being able to provide funding for schools, parks, the housing that we've built, over 130,000 approvals of housing for people of the city of New York. My mantra coming into my members, my colleagues, is that given the situation that we are facing with this immense homelessness situation, we can never be the council that says no to housing when there are so many people that need places to live. So, yeah.
So you actually went to high school with Mayor Adams.
I did.
To whom you were not related, let's just
Yes.
say that. But a lot of your tenure has been spent fighting some of issues with Mayor Adams. For example, the council has overrode several vetoes of the mayor. Most recently, you overrode a veto on delivery worker pay protection and criminal prosecution of street vendors. I'm wondering how you view that in terms of your entire tenure, the fact that you've spent a lot of time sort of speaking against some of this mayor's policies.
I think that it's been a lot of time wasted, unfortunately, and we never want to see our New Yorkers suffer because of a deterioration of relationship between the factions of City Hall. Look, I came into this role as Speaker with high hopes, tremendous hopes for a great legacy. You know, Black mayor on one side of City Hall, Black speaker for the first time ever in City Hall. And for me, that was a history that should have been beautiful. Terrific. And we look at it now today, unfortunately, and the circumstances around it, it didn't turn out that way, unfortunately. And that saddens me, Jeff. It really does. It saddens me because that relationship should never look the way it looks today. But I am comforted in knowing that the work that we've done in this council has been to benefit the least of these in this city, just like my commitment has always been, just like it is today. You mentioned the overrides. The overrides had to do with delivery workers, people that ride bicycles in the rain, something that I would never do, to make sure that we're fed, to make sure that there are meals that are delivered. This was also, it was a joint package that was presented alongside with a bill that was already passed for delivery workers delivering door to door. This was for grocery deliverers as well. So there was no reason why this particular legislation should be denied when the other was not denied. Pay parity is something that we all look forward to and that we all should want to foster in this city. So that's what we're about.
And so several times during your tenure, you've questioned the mayor. We know he was facing a 5-count federal corruption indictment, which was dropped by the Trump Justice Department. You called for his resignation. You raised concerns about bills that were being passed, the executive order to allow ICE on Rikers Island, which the city council tried to file suit against. And even last week with the vendor bill and you raised issues about how this would help Trump's pro-immigration or deportation agenda. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering now, as you head out, were you concerned about the city? Was the city being represented properly by this mayor because of those very serious concerns you raised about him being compromised?
Let's just say thank goodness for the city council being the voice of reason of protection for New Yorkers. Again, particularly for the least of these that are looking towards a better city and a better life for themselves. When we took the mayor, specifically the first deputy mayor who signed Executive Order 50, to task and legally challenged that executive order in the courts, and wanting to bring that, and them wanting to bring ICE back onto Rikers when that was illegal. It was outlawed some years ago. Before I ever became a council member, it was outlawed. So it was illegal. So now to see, and the timing of it all, and the mayor's issues with his legal issues, his corruption issues, his indictment, the timing around that, all of a sudden, we knew of the meetings. Everyone knew of the meetings with the Trump administration and the timing. Charges were dropped, and it was obvious. It was obvious to Judge Rosario. It was obvious that this was a deal that was made. It was obvious when the mayor sat on Fox News and, kind of yucked it up with a certain other representative from the Trump administration. It was obvious that the deal had been made. So to see this come down to penalize folks and try to bring back something that was already illegal, we had to do something. The judge agreed. We've won every single time that they've appealed. I assume they're going to appeal again. They will lose again. This is just the wrong thing to do. People have been disappeared under the Trump administration. I don't believe anything that Donald Trump says. It baffles me why anyone else would. We can take a poll right now in a survey. We can walk outside and poll any New Yorker. I dare say that everyone would agree with us. We don't trust Donald Trump to say or to do what he says he is going to do. So this is why we had to fight back and sue and win.
You served several years in the council before becoming the speaker. I'm wondering how the politics has changed. Did you ever envision that you would be fighting against President Trump as
Never.
speaker, as leader of the city council?
Never ever would I assume that we would be at a place in our country where we are right now. Never ever would I assume that these particular challenges would be facing us. Certainly, I expected challenges. I worked pretty close with the former administration, very well with the former administration, by the way, and things were tough, but they were different, a different kind of tough. This brings in a whole other thing. This brings in a national scope, if you will, something that just not New York and New Yorkers are grappling with when it comes to the Trump administration, but something that our entire nation is grappling with when it comes to the policies and just the negative aspects and the toll that it will have on this nation. It's very, very different to, to think that we can enact certain things locally and we can impact them. It's a much bigger challenge now to fight, federal cuts and saying, billions of dollars will now be cut from New York City and New York State because of retribution, retaliation, nothing more than retaliation. That's a very different kind of governance that we're used to.
Right. Well, the nation is focused on the Democratic nominee right now, Zohran Mamdani. You made a run for mayor. You put your hat into the ring. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit what you learned from your run, first of all. And second of all, where are you in supporting the Democratic nominee for mayor? Have you made a decision about what your support will be for him?
Well, I've said from day one, I am a lifelong Democrat, and my support would be and is with the Democratic nominee, Zohran Mamdani. That is the Democratic nominee. I do support him. The run for mayor, I was very enthused. It was exhilarating to be out there, to go through all of the boroughs on a citywide level. I mean, I had experience, obviously, as speaker in dealing with our boroughs, with my colleagues and districts, but this was a totally different thing. And the reception, I have to say, I always had a terrific reception in forums, in communities, day to day, knocking on doors, getting in the middle of folks at subway stations at the crack of dawn. The reception was always great. And I thought that it would have been a marvelous thing to be the first woman mayor of the city of New York. That was not to be, but I would not change the experience for anything.
It feels like your relationship with Mayor Adams led you to actually throw your hat into the ring.
Did.
And run for mayor. Why do you think New York City hasn't had a woman mayor as of yet? And will we have one anytime soon?
We can hope. We can hope. Somebody said to me, it looks like New York is not ready for nice things. So we can only hope that that one day New York will be ready for a woman mayor. Women have so much to offer, and I piggybacked off of the run of Kamala Harris for president. We're sorority sisters. So, and we did communicate during her run. We communicated during my run for mayor. She was very encouraging, and she said, don't give up, don't give up. And it was never a matter of giving up for me, but just looking at her fight. And I was in it to win it. I was in it. My motto was Adrienne, for the people. As speaker, I've always been for the people. I will always be for the people. It is not a personal thing for personal gain, but it's always been for me about my next door neighbor, what that experience is, because I am my own constituent.
Your tenure ends in a couple of months. I'm wondering what's next for you. There've been discussions or rumors that maybe Kathy Hochul would tap you as lieutenant governor. Have you had any discussions with Governor Hochul about maybe serving as the next lieutenant governor were she to win?
I've heard those rumors also. They're very interesting. I have not had any conversations with the governor or any staffers of the governor about becoming lieutenant governor or running as lieutenant governor. So there really is there's nothing for me to say about that, because that's not happened at this moment in time. I have a lot of options. And I keep saying, I don't come from the world of politics. I come from the private sector in corporate America for almost 2 decades before I ever thought about running for public office. But the thing about it is that when I became the first woman elected to represent District 28 in Queens and stepped into city council chambers for the first time, Jeff, my spirit said, welcome home. I knew that I was born to do this work. I've never looked back. I've always, and Vanessa Gibson, you took this from me, I wake up on purpose with a purpose every single day. I was born to do this work.
Are you worried about what the next council speaker will face as we see sort of political division growing in our country, which has affected New York City? What are your concerns, and do you have any advice for the person that will succeed you?
Certainly I have concerns. I have concerns because, as I just said, this city has never faced what the city is facing. The city has issues by ourselves. Now we have to take on the national aspect of it, and an administration that is the antithesis of the goodness that I believe the heart of this nation is about. So that will become an immense factor for the next Speaker of the City Council to incorporate in their landscape of how they will move as the leader of the body of 50 members, as the co-leader in government for the City of New York alongside of the mayor of the city. So there is going to be a lot of thought, a lot of strategy, and a lot of purpose, I dare say, when it comes to the work of the next Speaker of the City Council.
Madam Speaker, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for coming in to share your insights and accomplishments as Speaker of the New York City Council. Coming up next, how are Democrats losing young men, and what can they do about it? My next guest is Della Volpe, Director of Polling at Harvard's Institute of Politics and CEO of Social Sphere. In a New York Times essay this week, he warns Democrats that Charlie Kirk's success and the party's failure with young men could cost them a generation, unless they build a real community and engage honestly with issues of identity. His piece quickly generated intense debate on NewYorkTimes.com, reflecting just how much this conversation matters in today's politics. John is also the author of the 2022 national bestseller, Fight: How is Gen Z Channeling Their Fear and Passion to Save America? Welcome, John.
Thanks. It's great to be with you.
So maybe you could just start off by telling us a little bit about your piece. You argue that Democrats can learn from Charlie Kirk and how he cultivated young people. Tell us a little more about what specifically Democrats can learn, do you think?
Of course. I think we can all learn from this, to be honest with you. And listen, I'm not going to make any excuses, okay, for the kind of speech and the kinds of ideology that he believed in or debated or spread. That's not what I'm here to do. But what I'm here to do is to take a step back and to understand why Charlie Kirk was undoubtedly very successful at his job. And that job in 2024 was to help elect Donald Trump president. This was an incredibly close election, as we know. If 1 out of 100 voters change their mind into those 3 blue wall states, we have a different outcome. So what was it that essentially allowed Donald Trump and Charlie Kirk to change the ways in which so many young men voted? Back in 2020, young men overwhelmingly supported Joe Biden. That wasn't the case. So what happened? The way in which I believe this happened was over years, Charlie Kirk began to establish a community not based first on politics or ideology, but based upon connection and essentially doing something that I think Democrats weren't doing, which is spending time in often hostile places and having meaningful conversations about how they think about their lives, how they define success, and giving a place where people could feel connected to someone else who was in the same boat and had the same struggles. He did that, and then that evolved from community to culture to ultimately a very effective persuasion and mobilization effort that helped elect the president.
Well, as I said, there was intense debate online about your article. I'm wondering, some readers felt that Charlie Kirk was offering ideology that, many describe as hate speech, and that, channeling, quote, owning the libs, one reader said, and that sort of is toxic, on internet culture and part of the problem that we're seeing today. So I'm wondering, how do you square some of those thoughts about Kirk's ideology and what Democrats can actually learn from him?
Listen, I don't think that they can learn from his ideology, okay? What they can learn from is understanding, what did he hear, okay? What do I hear? What does anyone who spends time with the younger people hear, okay? They hear basically 3 things. The first thing is that it's incredibly challenging today, okay, to afford a basic life. Certainly in New York City, where I have a young daughter, afford rent, a home, basically, how to have a life on a living wage, something that parents and grandparents were able to do, one. The second thing is they're concerned about institutions, and the very institutions designed to protect us, too many feel, have failed us, whether it's K through 12 education, preparing folks for life after school, whether it's college or the workforce, second. And the third is specifically young men. They have this, what I called in the piece, this masculinity vertigo, where many young men raised to feel like they should be providers and protectors. But when you can't provide and protect yourself and you're vulnerable, that leaves you feeling less confident, less good in yourself. Okay, so that is what he heard. Okay, and then what he did was he was able to turn those fears, those grievances towards political action using a far right methodology and ideology. Okay, you have in your city today someone of a different party doing the same thing, listening to those grievances, listening to those concerns about economic anxiety, about institutions failing us, and what it means to be successful. And that candidate, Mondami, is leading the polls by double digits in doing something that few people thought he could do. And it's not just based on young people. He's leading among most demographics current to today. So the idea of listening isn't something that is something unique to Charlie Kirk. Successful politicians, elected officials do that every single day. It's what you do with it. And my argument is that Democrats haven't invested in that first piece, in the listening piece.
I mean, you talked a bit about the challenges facing young men. You focused specifically on young men as a sort of opportunity for Democrats to gain ground, sort of the economic struggles, this distrust of institutions. I'm wondering, have Democrats not offered solutions to some of the problems that young people are facing, or have they not just sort of form those solutions in a way that people can process and understand and then endorse and vote for them?
I think it's more the latter than the former. I think that Democrats are, clearly committed to the causes that young people care about. Okay, I think though that they haven't been spending the time in the places that younger people overall and younger men are having these meaningful conversations. Okay, so I think that to me it's about connecting those solutions to the individual and showing the most important lesson in politics, the tangible difference that supporting one side or one policy can have on their lives. Listen, if not for younger people, including younger men in 2020, we wouldn't have over $180 billion relieved in student debt. That was something young people did because they helped elect President Biden, right? We wouldn't have some of the most significant climate investments in history without younger people showing up. It's about connecting policies to specific tangible effects they make in everyday life.
I wonder how Democrats should deal with the idea expressed by some readers that the whole crisis around masculinity is really about the loss of privilege and it being difficult to sort of address that issue if you believe that there should be more equality. I'm wondering how can Democrats deal with that distinction?
Well, I think that perhaps they could have a meaningful conversation with a younger person who might feel that way and say, you may feel that you're being targeted for something that you weren't part of. Okay, that there's no question that their parents, their grandparents, and their ancestors had more privilege than most other people living in the country who were not white men. But that doesn't necessarily, in the eyes of young male voters, square, because they're not able to take advantage of any of those supposed privileges that their parents or grandparents had. That if they would tell me if they had privilege, they wouldn't be on the verge of being homeless, as one example. If they had privilege, they wouldn't be tens of thousands of dollars in debt because of the cost of education. So I think my advice is recognize why some people feel that way and use that to make a connection and build from it. The privileges that their grandparents had may not be the same as young people, as younger men today. And recognize that and work with it. That's all.
There's an argument that Pete Buttigieg, the former transportation secretary, in his last race for mayor, did some of what you're talking about. He went on conservative talk shows. He challenged the idea that the right had a lock on religious belief, for example. Yet it did not work out for him. He did not do well in the presidential election. I'm wondering, do you see that the difficulty of what you're proposing in sort of what happened with Pete Buttigieg?
Well, yeah, I would argue it a different way. He was someone who was a mayor of South Bend, Indiana, right? Who I think who with a population of maybe 100,000, maybe a little bit more, okay, and was able, as the youngest candidate in the race, to catapult him into the top tier quite quickly. And he was able to do that by doing exactly what you suggested, by going on Fox TV, I think in early 2019, into an otherwise hostile environment, and defending his values, and framing that, and reminding folks that Republicans don't have a monopoly on strength. Republicans don't have a monopoly on freedom or on patriotism, and there's a new way to think about that. That, I think, is a significant part of the blueprint, and it's an opportunity for Democrats, okay, to frame those issues in a meaningful way connected to their policy. Freedom means the ability to, if you work 50, 60, 70 hours a week, to afford a place in New York City in an apartment. Freedom means the ability to have a family. And I conduct a lot of research in New York, and I hear so many young folks in their late 30s who desperately want to have a family but can't, because they can't find a way to extend, kind of their finances to afford a second bedroom, okay, in a one-bedroom apartment. That is the freedom that I think Democrats can channel and talk about, that can connect in more positive ways than what the Kirk thing was, what Kirk was about. But unless you invest in that time, you're not going to have the opportunity to make those conversations. I don't think we need to look any further, as I said, than the campaign of Zohran Mamdani right now.
As we head into midterm elections, it doesn't appear that President Trump and his administration have fulfilled some of the promises that attracted young men to him. Tell me a little bit about that. And, is that something Democrats should be focusing on as we head into midterm elections?
Yeah, well, I think without question. So at my company, Social Sphere, we conduct a monthly poll of young Americans, 18 to 29-year-olds. Okay? The expectations were incredibly high, as they are for most new presidents, in early January of this year. Okay, but when we began to track job approval ratings for President Trump on a dozen issues, but most importantly, inflation, economy, creating jobs, when I just look at young men, and we have thousands of them in our surveys, we find that Trump has lost over 20 points. His job approval rating is down 20 to 25 points across those issues. So they are now questioning, okay, what he's able to deliver. And if you think about the promise that he made in this campaign, is that he was going to make it easier to be a provider, okay? Well, younger men are now looking and saying, based upon the economy, based upon inflation, based upon tariffs, based upon the job market, is it easier or more challenging for me to be a provider, for me to feel good about myself? Because if I can't feel good about myself, I can't be a good partner. I can't be a good member, of my, extend myself in my community. That is, I think, an incredible opportunity for Democrats, again, not to focus on what Kirk said, but is how he did it. He listened and he invested and he spent the time to do that. And I think Democrats have an incredible opportunity to win back this emerging group of young, important voters if they do that.
John, thanks so much for taking the time to share your important research and perspective on young voters with us.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for this edition of Close Up for the New York Times and CUNY TV. I'm New York Times Metro reporter Jeff Mays. Don't forget to download the CUNY TV app, where you can catch our weekly program on the go, anytime, anywhere.